Now let's talk about Germany. Not the Germany of powerhouse exports, industrial dominance and physical discipline. No, those days are long gone. But the Germany that's been struggling to get back on its feet. After what is now a multi-year recession, this week the Bundesbank delivered a reality check that completely undercuts the idea of a fast, debt-fueled comeback. The headline sounds mild at first. It says Germany will grow again eventually, but when you look closer, it is clear how grim this actually is. According to the Bundesbank, Germany won't even claw its way back to pre-recession GDP levels until late 2026 at best. That is the best-case scenario, so at best, that's 4 years of lost momentum in Europe's largest economy. And this is despite a massive, truly massive borrowing spree. Berlin has announced nearly 1 trillion with a T. 1 trillion in new debt-funded spending, which is mostly focused on defense. I've uploaded multiple videos, as you know, multiple videos, on Chancellor Merkel's plans to militarize German economy. It is a considerable concern. Politicians, of course, hope that this would be the boost that finally pulls the economy out of the rut that it's been stuck in. Since Germany refused to import Russian energy, investors hope for the same. So did much of Europe, but even Bundesbank is now not buying that idea. It's just not going to happen. It says the Bundesbank just cut its 2026 growth forecast to 0.6%. Yes, that is not a mistake, 0.6% growth. And while it slightly raised its 2026 outlook to 1.3%, it immediately added that risks are effectively tilted to the downside. Moving forward, in other words, even this weak recovery might not happen. Can it get any worse? Doubtful? What makes the situation even sadder is that the headline growth, if you can call it growth, is 0.6%. Those numbers are flattered by a technicality. Next year simply has more working days, which mechanically boost GDP, and if you strip that out and you see real momentum. It looks even weaker. The government says growth will hit 1.3%. The Bundesbank says closer to 0.9%, and that's being generous. Meanwhile, Germany's public finances are deteriorating really fast. The budget deficit is projected to almost double, from 2.5% this year to 4.8% by 2028. That would be the largest deficit since reunification in the 1990s. So simply put, what's ahead for Germany in terms of economic crisis, of economic development, is worse than the global financial crisis of 2008. And it is also worse than the COVID pandemic. Debt will rise from 62% of GDP to about 68% of GDP, and that still sounds manageable by global standards. Of course, but for Germany, this is a psychological and political earthquake. This is the country that effectively lectured Southern Europe for a decade or even longer than that about fiscal restraint. Now it is blowing through its own rules and not even getting much growth in return. One of the biggest issues is where that money is actually going. Roughly a quarter of the new debt is not being used for productivity, boosting investments at all for German manufacturers that are already struggling with high energy costs, global competition, and of course, weaker EU demand. This is quite brutal. Remember, just several days ago, I uploaded a video about Volkswagen closing its German factories. Germany's industrial model is becoming less competitive by the year, and I don't think that is an overstatement. The Bundesbank is very blunt, too. It says Germany has been, quote, clearly in a recession since the end of 2022, and it even slipped back into contraction again this year in 2025. Then came the IMF, and it echoed the warning almost line by line. Yes, the IMF effectively praised Chancellor Friedrich Merz for reforming Germany's constitutional debt brake, calling it a landmark move. And yes, of course, it also acknowledged that higher government spending will give a short-term boost from 2026 onward, hopefully, but the core message was very, very clear. It was unmistakable. This will not fix Germany in the long run. This is not a fix. It is not going to address those structural issues that I keep discussing in my videos. After 4 years of stagnation, the IMF says Germany needs structural reform, not just stimulus. This can be done by boosting productivity and also modernizing an economy that is still rather heavily focused in slow growth manufacturing sectors that face quite a significant global competition, especially from China. Now let's switch to another factor that affects Germany's decline, and that is demographics. Demographics are another ticking bomb. Germany's working-age population is projected to shrink faster than any other G7 country, We are talking about fewer workers, weak productivity, growth, rising welfare costs. That is not a recipe for a strong recovery. As you know, it is a recipe for a complete and utter disaster. The IMF also issued a quiet but rather pointed warning. It effectively said, don't waste the borrowed money. Don't turn it into political perks or handouts that do nothing for long-term capacity. Use it to actually raise productive potential, or the debt will simply weigh on the economy later. It's going to pull you down. And so that is the core contradiction that Germany is now facing. The German government is going against that very simple logic. It can afford more debt, yes, for now. Its debt ratio is still the lowest in the G7. But debt alone cannot reverse Germany's structural decline. And if the borrowed money gets absorbed by short-term politics, which we can see is actually happening, the window for any reforms, for any positive outcomes, for any structural improvement, that window will close fast. While in fact it's already closing, given Chancellor Merkel's militarization plans, Germany is no longer the automatic growth engine of Europe, and it is an aging high-cost economy that is effectively trying to borrow its way out of stagnation. The danger isn't collapse. The danger is something slower and much more painful. It is a slow but steady decline that will end in a complete transformation of Germany and its economy. And if Germany can't fix itself, the consequences won't stop at its borders. Europe's economies are slipping, and no amount of deficit spending, no amount of new debt can hide that any longer. Stay tuned. I will keep you updated here on YouTube and over on my Substack and Patreon if you are in Germany.